Hey guys! In today's video, I bring you a shocking and impossible to ignore story. Let's meet Selene Whitmore, a woman who died for 13 minutes and came back with an urgent message about Jesus' return. During her near-death experience, she was taken to a realm of light, where an angel revealed terrifying visions about the future of humanity. What she saw could change everything you believe. The great apostasy has already begun. Time is running out, and many are not prepared. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this shocking revelation. My name is Selene Whitmore. Maybe you've never heard of me. I'm just an ordinary woman. I was born and raised in Charleston, Carolina do Sul, where I spent my life teaching history in a public school. I am a mother, grandmother, and I have always tried to live simply, valuing my family and my faith. I was never a religious fanatic, but I always believed in God. I was raised in church. I sang hymns, read the scriptures. He did everything right, or at least he thought he did. But on the night of October 12, 2023, everything changed. Until that day, I lived my life without questioning much, without thinking deeply about the times in which we live. Like many, I believed that God was there somewhere and that I would meet him only at the right time. But I had no idea that he was about to find me first. I died that night. For 13 minutes, my heart stopped. For the doctors, my story should have ended there, but not finished. I saw the truth, and now I'm here to tell you what I witnessed. Maybe you doubt me. Maybe you think it was a delirium, a hallucination caused by a lack of oxygen in the brain. You have that right. But before you jump to conclusions, I want you to hear me out. I want that feel what I felt. Because if my story is true, and I guarantee it is, then that means time is running out for all of us. The things I saw, the words I heard, the warnings I was given, they weren't just for me, went to all of us. And the only question that has haunted me ever since is this: will you be ready when he returns? That night seemed to be like any other. The school auditorium was still echoing with applause when I left the event. My grandson, Oliver, had performed in the children's choir, and I couldn't be more proud. He wore a small navy blue sweater and, at the end of the performance, he looked for me in the audience and smiling and waving excitedly. "Grandma, did you see?" he asked, running over to me as the parents released the children. "See, my love, you sang beautifully." I hugged him tight, smelling his childish scent mixed with the scent of new school fabric. It was one of those moments we want to cherish forever. The light rain was beginning to fall when I said goodbye to the family and headed to the parking lot. The October cold made the night damp and misty, but nothing to worry me about. I just drove, listening to the rhythmic sound of the rain hitting the windshield and feeling at peace. But that peace was interrupted by something that shouldn't have happened. 9:47 p.m. I remember exactly the moment. My fingers turned the heater knob to adjust the car's temperature, and then I felt it, a pain like never before. It was as if an invisible knife was going through my chest, cutting me from the inside out. The air fled my lungs, and a crushing tightness took over my heart. My vision became blurred. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I tried to hit the brakes, but my body wouldn't respond. Sounds became distant. The radio, the rain, the sound of tires on the wet road. It all became a distant hum. The car started to skid. The road was empty, but that didn't matter. There was nothing I could do. I no longer had control. I could see the headlights blinking against the raindrops, like little flashes in slow motion. The steering wheel turned on its own as the car slid to the shoulder. There was a ditch on the right, but I couldn't avoid it. Everything went dark, and then I died. What happened next was more real than anything I've ever experienced. There was no fear. The dark came suddenly, but contrary to what I imagined about death, there was no suffering, there was no despair. What I felt was just lightness. It was as if, all my life, I had been carrying an invisible weight, and only now did I realize what it was like to be without it. My body felt insubstantial, but at the same time I was completely conscious. I knew who had died, but somehow, that it didn't cause me panic. Then I saw it. There it was, or rather, my body, still inside the car. The vehicle was tilted in the ditch, its headlights shining through the light rain. The driver's side window had cracked, and my head was tilted slightly to the side. My eyes were closed. My skin was pale. It was surreal. How could I be looking at myself? He floated above the scene, feeling no pain, No cold, no limitations of the human body. Time seemed to have slowed down, as if each drop of rain took forever to hit the ground. But the most impressive thing was the absence of fear. Death was not what I expected. And then, the transformation began. The darkness around me began to dissipate. A gentle warmth touched my skin, if I still had one. One golden, pulsating light. It appeared in the distance, and I was drawn to it. It was like I was being sucked into a tunnel of light, but without pressure or discomfort. And that's when I heard the voice. Celine. It was no ordinary voice. It didn't come from outside nor from inside me. She simply existed, vibrating throughout my being. She was strong, but loving, authoritative but comforting. I tried to respond, but realized that I didn't need to talk. My thoughts were instantly understood. The light grew, more and more intense, filling everything around me. I couldn't see beyond it, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that something, or someone, was waiting for me. So from the light, he appeared. The figure was immense, majestic. His body radiated a golden glow, and his eyes, my God, your eyes, they weren't just eyes. There were entire galaxies rotating inside them. His face was impossible to describe. It changed as I looked, as if it contained the sum of all faces ever created. And then he spoke. Fear not. The Lord sent me to show you what is to come. My heart, or what was left of it, trembled. I knew nothing would be the same again. I was in front of an indescribable presence. No words could capture its grandeur. The being staring back at me wasn't just beautiful. He radiated an overwhelming authority and, at the same time, an incomparable peace. His eyes were like windows to the infinite, containing lights that moved in spirals, as if the entire universe was reflected in them. His skin shone like polished bronze in the sun, and his clothes were made of pure light, fluid like golden water. Your wings, oh, your wings. They were not made of feathers, but of something that looked like pure energy, vibrating with a force that made the entire space around it pulsate. I should have been scared, but I didn't feel it. Instead, a deep reverence came over me. My first instinct was to kneel, but I realized that there, in that place, the knees did not exist the way we know it. My essence bowed to him, as if my spirit understood something my mortal mind could never comprehend. It was then that he spoke again. Fear not. The Lord sent me to show you what is to come. His voice didn't sound like a normal voice. It vibrated inside me, resonating in every particle of my being. It was as if the truth was being written directly on my soul. Before I could ask anything, I felt a pull. The space around us has transformed. The golden light dissolved, and suddenly, I was looking at Earth, but not as we know it. The planet was enveloped in a living darkness, a dense, pulsating fog, which seemed to crawl on the surface like a starving creature. It was a kind of darkness that sucked everything around, a shadow that carried with it a terrible weight. My heart, or what was left of it, constricted. What is that? I asked, unable to contain my distress. The angel responded without hesitation. The apostasy. I didn't know what to say. The scriptures spoke about a time of great separation from God, but I never imagined it would be like this. But there are lights, I murmured, noticing small glowing dots scattered throughout the darkness. There were few, but they were there. Some flickered like candles. Others shone brightly, like torches in a storm. The angel nodded. They are those who still remain faithful. They uphold the world in prayer. I watched, fascinated and terrified at the same time, because, compared to the vastness of darkness, they were few, very few. They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. The voice that echoed, it wasn't the angels. It was something infinitely greater, something that made the very space around us tremble. It was the voice of the Lord. My tears flowed, or did I just feel like I was crying? Because, for the first time, I understood. The churches were flood, but the souls were empty, and the great apostasy was already happening now. Before I could process it, the angel raised his hand. There is still more to see. And then, the next vision unfolded before me. I was taken by a new displacement. As if being pulled through an invisible veil, I felt the landscape around me change. The planet was still before me, but now I saw what was hidden beneath the surface of reality. A dense darkness covered the world, but it wasn't just the absence of light. It was something alive, something that slithered like shadow snakes, slinking around the corners of civilization. I saw churches, houses, streets, all of them shrouded by this sinister mist, which pulsed and moved, as if it was sucking something out of people. "What is that?" My voice sounded like a thought, but it was clearly heard by the angel next to me. The great apostasy took over the earth. His voice carried both sadness and authority. Men love the forms of godliness, but deny their power. Darkness feeds on empty faith. I looked more closely and realized the crowded churches. People sang, raised their hands, participated in services. But when I looked closer, your eyes were empty. There was no passion. There was no real connection. Darkness clung to them like invisible chains, but they seemed to be loving it, I argued, unable to understand how that was possible. The angel shook his head. The Lord sees beyond appearances. Their mouths proclaim his name, but their hearts reject him. Faith has become a lifeless ritual, an empty practice without power. I felt a tightening in my soul. You knew what he was talking about. How many times had I gone to church without truly feeling the presence of God? How many times have I sung the hymns just because I was expected to? But then, something caught my attention. In the midst of that mass of superficial worship, I saw small groups of light. They were scattered, but they glowed with an intensity that pierced the darkness. Your prayers were like living flames, fighting the shadow around. "Who are they?" I asked, feeling hope. "The faithful remnant." The angel looked at them with reverence. "Those who still know the true God, those who seek him in spirit and truth. Their faith is not based on great temples, but on their surrendered hearts." I saw a small group gathered in a simple house. They were kneeling, holding hands, their eyes closed intensely. I saw an elderly woman, her face marked by time, but her words full of life. Every prayer that came out of his mouth lit up the place where they were, as if a light barrier protected them. I saw a young man in a lonely room, his Bible open in front of him, tears streaming down his face as he cried out to God. I saw a child kneeling by the bed, hands clasped. His prayer was like a rising star in the midst of darkness. My heart sank. "Their numbers are small," I muttered. "How can they resist?" The angel smiled. "But there was firmness in your gaze. For greater is he who is in them than he who is in the world." And then, the scenario changed again. Now I would see what would come next, and my spirit trembled at what was revealed. The environment around us has changed once again. Now I saw the world in the not-too-distant future. What I witnessed made me feel a deep cold, not a physical cold, but something that chills the soul. I saw brilliant cities, full of advanced technology. Huge screens broadcast messages of peace and progress. Everything seemed perfect, organized, efficient, safe, but something was wrong. People walked the streets with blank expressions. There was a frightening uniformity. I saw citizens using small devices implanted in their hands or wrists, swiping them on sensors to access buildings, pay for their purchases, validate their identity. The angel spoke. The world sought safety above truth. Control was imposed under the guise of order. Suddenly, I realized what I didn't see there. True churches. I saw modern temples full, but the spirit of worship was dead. Preachers spoke about prosperity and inclusion, but the words were geese, manipulated. "They think they still serve me," said the voice of the Lord, echoing throughout the dimension. "But they sold their soul for comfort and acceptance." We laws being signed. At first they were small, barely noticeable measures, requirements to harmonize beliefs and protect against dangerous speech. Then came the more severe restrictions. Speeches about repentance and holiness came to be considered offensive. Social networks and the media amplified these changes, shaping minds. God's name was not banished, but emptied of meaning. And then, I saw something terrible. We, those who remained faithful, being hunted. The chase. It didn't come the way I imagined, with soldiers invading houses. No, she came as a constant pressure, a compliance requirement. If someone refused to accept the new order, he was removed, fired, branded as an extremist. The angel pointed to a scene. I saw a man being questioned on camera. He was a teacher and a Christian. He refused to deny his faith, but his expression was one of anguish. "Did you know that this type of thinking can be considered dangerous?" asked an interviewer, with a cold smile. He took a deep breath. "I follow God, not men." The next day, his bank account was blocked. His name was erased from professional records. He ceased to exist in the system. I saw families being separated. I saw parents crying because their children were taught to deny faith. I saw hidden Christians, worshiping in secret, their prayers said in whispers, their praises sung without sound, just moving their lips so as not to be discovered. What about those who remain steadfast? I asked, my voice shaking. The angel looked at me with a mixture of seriousness and hope. They will be strengthened. And then, an explosion of light ripped through the darkness. I saw something wonderful happening in the midst of persecution. I saw simple men and women being raised up as spiritual leaders. They were not shepherds, did not have religious titles. They were teachers, doctors, common workers. But his words carried power. God is raising his army outside of traditional institutions. And that's when I saw the clock, the celestial clock, where the numbers were prophetic events, and the pointer was moving too fast. Something big was about to happen, something definitive. The angel turned to me, his voice carrying a weight that made me shudder. Now, see time running out. And then, I saw the future being sealed. My vision shifted once again. Now I was faced with something that seemed eternal. The sky around us was filled with vibrant light, but what stood out in front of me was a colossal structure, an immense clock, floating in the void, with no visible supports. But it was no ordinary watch. The numbers, they weren't numbers. In their place, there was events in human history, each marked with frightening precision. I saw ancient scenes, crowds running as Rome burned in flames, the crucifixion of Jesus, medieval knights marching into battle, the rebirth of nations, the advancement of technology. I saw the 20th century unfolding before me, with wars, discoveries, social changes. But then, I realized something terrible. The pointer was moving faster than normal. Time is speeding up, said the angel next to me. His voice was deep, filled with a weight that made me shudder. What does this mean? I asked, my gaze fixed on the clock, fearing the answer. The days are being shortened. My heart, or what was left of it, raced. I remembered the verse. If those days were not shortened, no one would survive. But for the sake of the chosen, they will be shortened. Matthew 24:22. The world has entered the last cycle. The angel pointed to an event near the pointer. My spirit was filled with restlessness. Natural disasters intensifying in an absurd way. Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. But the worst part wasn't the physical chaos. The worst was what came later. The nations came together, but not under the banner of God. I saw global leaders meeting, signing treaties, promising peace, but I felt that peace was an illusion. I saw a man stand out among the others. His presence was charismatic, his voice was engaging. The crowds, they adored him, calling for solutions. He spoke with authority, promised security, stability, but my spirit rejected your presence. Who is he? My voice barely came out, stuck in the lump in my throat. The angel did not respond immediately, but then he looked at me and said, "The world will bow before the one who brings false promises." A chill ran through my core. That man, he wasn't who he said he was. The clock advanced once again. Now I saw a different scenario. You a true church, not that of empty temples, not that of meaningless rituals, but the church that still carried the presence of God. She was not hidden in great cathedrals. It was in houses, in fields, in dark streets and abandoned warehouses. I saw men and women praying fervently, their faces bathed in tears, and then the light of God descended on them. Revival will not come from where they expect. The angel spoke. God is not calling just pastors and leaders. He is calling out the anonymous, the forgotten, the invisible. We children preaching, their voices loaded with an anointing so strong that chilled the air around. We elderly people, whom the world considered worthless, being renewed in strength to guide the younger ones. We love and compassion resurfacing among the true believers. But I also saw the price they would pay. And then the clock sounded. It was a sound so deep, so deafening, that it made the entire space vibrate. It was like time had reached an invisible limit. The angel turned to me. Your eyes were like fire now, shining with the intensity of thousands of suns. Time is running out. His voice carried the authority of millennia of existence. And then, he gave me the final warning. Tell them to get ready. Time is short. A force pulled me violently. The light began to move away. You was being ripped from sight. And suddenly, I was back. The feeling of being pulled back was violent. My soul resisted, as if I didn't want to leave that dimension where the truth was exposed before my eyes. But something pushed me back. Then I saw it. I was no longer in front of the prophetic clock. Now, I watched the earth again, but this time, from a different angle. Darkness still spread over the world, but within it, there were small flames burning. They appeared in the most unlikely places, in densely populated cities, in forgotten villages, inside prisons, hospitals, war zones. These flames were prayers. Every sincere prayer is a flame that consumes the darkness, said the angel beside me. The power of intercession has sustained this world. It was then that I saw something even more impressive. It was not the great religious leaders who sustained these flames. They were not renowned theologians. They were not the pastors of mega congregations. They were the little ones, we children kneeling at their bedsides, praying in whispers, and every word out of their mouths went up like a pillar of fire. The surrounding darkness retreated from them, unable to resist the power they carried. We elderly with trembling hands, holding rosaries, worn-out Bibles, praying alone in their rooms, and his words broke spiritual chains on entire families. We mothers and fathers interceding for their children, and their cries ripped through the sky like thunder, bringing answers that seemed impossible. My heart burned inside me. I never knew it was like this, I murmured, feeling a lump in my throat. The angel looked at me with an intense shine in his eyes. The world underestimates those God values most. He pointed to a child who looked to be no more than 5 years old. Her small face was bathed in tears, her hands clasped in prayer. Her voice was sweet, fragile, but every word she said created waves of light around her. See how big the little ones are in the kingdom of heaven? I saw one group of teenagers, no money, no resources, no spotlight, but filled with the Spirit. They were gathered in a hidden cellar, praying for each other, laying hands on the sick. And then, miracles happened before my eyes. People were healed. People were freed. The revival. It wasn't coming from the places the world expected. It wasn't coming from institutions, from stone temples, from dead traditions. It was happening in the streets, in the houses, in prison cells, in hospitals. The glory of God was not limited to human altars. But why don't traditional churches realize this? I asked. Overcome with restlessness, the angel's expression turned dark, because many have lost their first love. I felt a tightness in my chest, and then the last revelation came. We, the prayers of the little ones, children, elderly people, simple servants of God, rising like columns of light, they connected in the sky, creating an invisible shield over the earth. It was this prayer that still held God's complete judgment. And then, the shield began to crack. Darkness was forcing its way through. There's no more time to waste, Selene, the angel said with a tone of urgency. Tell them to pray. Tell them to get ready. I felt a strength pulling me again. The vision began to disappear. My soul struggled to remain, but it was too late. I was coming back. The feeling of being pulled back was like being sucked into an invisible whirlpool. My spirit resisted, as if he knew I hadn't finished seeing everything yet. But something bigger than me was in control. The light around me began to go out. The heavenly heat that enveloped me was replaced by a piercing cold. The weight of the mortal body began to creep over me again, as if I were being immersed in something dense and suffocating. And then, I heard voices. She's coming back. My God, she's coming back. The shock of reality was overwhelming. I felt my chest suddenly inflate, as if something had hit me from the inside. My lungs burned as I took in air again. My eyes suddenly opened. Bright lights flashed above me. A hospital. I blinked a few times, trying to understand where I was. The sound of a heart monitor echoed next to me, beeping rapidly. An oxygen mask covered my face. Hands held mine. Voices screamed. Dr. Grayson, she's conscious. I felt something run down my face. Tears. No, they were tears of others. I wanted to speak, but my throat was dry. That's when I saw Charlotte, my daughter, leaning over me, her face bathed in tears. His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of relief and terror. Mom, you're back. My hand shook as I tried to hold it. Charlotte, my voice was hoarse, broken. She sobbed, holding my hand tighter. Mom, you died. Your heart stopped for 13 minutes. They said that there was nothing more they could do. 13 minutes. I knew in that moment that he had returned for a reason. I looked at the faces around me. The doctors were still stunned. Nurses murmured among themselves. I could feel their shock. And then, I saw a man in a white coat. His face showed more disbelief than relief. He held a clipboard in his hands, but his expression made it clear that nothing that happened made sense to him. Dr. Elias Grayson, the cardiologist responsible for my case. That's not possible, he muttered, running a hand through his hair as if trying to reorganize his thoughts. There is no medical explanation for this. His heart has been inactive for 13 minutes. There should be no brain function. You shouldn't be here. I slowly turned to him. But I am. My voice came out stronger than I expected. There was a deep silence in the room, a silence filled with something greater than anyone there understood. And then, I knew I needed to speak. My breathing was still ragged. My mind reeled with everything I had seen, but I couldn't keep it to myself. I grabbed my daughter's hand tightly. Charlotte. She looked at me, still shaken. I saw everything. His eyes filled with confusion. What? My voice was shaky but unwavering. I saw the sky. I saw the angels. I saw what's coming. The impact of those words spread across the room like an invisible wave. Elijah Grayson crossed his arms. Skeptical, Charlotte pressed her lips together, as if she feared what I would say next. The nurses exchanged uncertain looks, but I didn't care. I knew I had come back with a purpose, and me needed to deliver the message he had received. The world needed to know. The silence in the room was thick, filled with expectation and doubt. I knew my words would change everything. My daughter, Charlotte, was still holding my hand tightly, as if she was afraid I would disappear again. Dr. Elias Grayson was still watching me with a skeptical expression, his arms crossed, like a man of science who I was fighting something I couldn't explain. But I didn't hesitate. I saw the sky. I saw the angels. My heart quickened as I realized the weight of what I was about to reveal, and I saw the future. Charlotte blinked, her face pale. Mom, what do you mean by that? My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from urgency of the message. Time is running out. Those words came out of my mouth like an echo of what the angel told me. They vibrated inside me, as if they still carried divine authority. Doctor, Grayson shook his head and let out a tired sigh. Ms. Whitmore, it is common for patients who have experienced cardiac arrest to have experiences, hallucinations, delusions caused by oxygen deprivation to the brain. I looked at him firmly. This was not a delusion. It was real. I saw Charlotte glance at him, as if trying to find a rational explanation, but then I held his hand tighter. Charlotte, listen to me. I saw everything. I saw how people abandoned the true faith. I saw crowded churches but without God within them. I saw a world shrouded in darkness. I saw a chase coming, a subtle control growing. She turned pale. Mom, that seems... But I also saw hope, I interrupted, feeling hot tears running down my face. I saw the little ones, children, the elderly, simple workers, holding true faith. I saw their prayers shining like torches, driving away the darkness. I saw a great awakening emerging outside traditional institutions. God is raising up his people, but time is short. Charlotte covered her mouth with her hand. The nurses in the room stopped what they were doing, listening intently. It was as if something inside them was awakening. Dr. Grayson still looked uncomfortable. That doesn't make sense, he muttered, scratching the back of his head. There is no medical explanation for his survival. His heart was stopped for 13 minutes. You should have permanent brain damage. But you're here, lucid, talking as if nothing had happened. I looked up at him, feeling something bigger than me take me completely. Because God brought me back. A shiver ran through the room. The nurses looked at each other, one of them placing her hand on her chest, excited. Charlotte let out a sob, her eyes teary. If that's true, she began hesitantly, her voice shaking. What should we do? I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes for a moment and felt the presence of the angel still around me. The warning still echoed inside me. I opened my eyes again, completely sure of what I needed to say. We must prepare. We must be ready. The time for playing church is over. What matters now is not what you pretend to believe, but what you actually live. My voice sounded firm. Those who truly know God will be strengthened. But those who just follow empty rituals will not realize when the truth is in front of them. The Lord is calling his people, but it's now or never. Charlotte started to cry. Dr. Grayson was silent, but his eyes had lost some of their skeptical coldness. Will you be ready when he returns? The question came out as a whisper, but filled the whole room. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just for them. It was for everyone. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.